Welcome to Bible Crossroads. Today we are going to expand on forgiveness. That sweet release of resentment is such a pivotal part of our lives. It's a curious thing, isn't it? One moment we're as mad as a hornet at someone who's done us wrong, and the next, we're letting it all go like water off a duck's back. It's like we've got this inner switch, and when we flip it, we're suddenly filled with this sense of peace, a feeling that's as comforting as a warm biscuit on a cold morning. But why do we forgive? Well, folks, forgiveness is like a clean slate. It's the chance to start over, to wipe away the past like erasing a chalkboard. It's the opportunity to let go of the hurt and the anger, to bid farewell to the grudges that weigh us down like a sack of potatoes. And you know what they say about carrying a grudge, right? It's like swallowing a poison apple and expecting the other person to keel over. Now, I don't know about you, but I'd rather be the one standing upright, thank you very much. But here's the kicker, my friends. Forgiveness isn't just about making ourselves feel better. It's about healing relationships too. It's about extending a hand of friendship to someone who's wronged us, about saying, hey, we're all human, we all make mistakes. And let's not forget, forgiveness is a big deal in the Bible too. Remember the story of Joseph and his brothers? Or how about the parable of the prodigal son? The good book is chock full of tales about forgiveness, about letting go and starting anew. So, why do we forgive? Well, folks, I reckon it's because forgiveness is woven into the very fabric of our humanity. It's part of who we are, a testament to our capacity for compassion, understanding, and love. So, buckle up, y'all. We're about to take a deep dive into the good book, the Bible, to see what it teaches us about forgiveness. You see, folks, forgiveness ain't just about saying, I forgive you and moving on. No, sir, it's much more than that. When we dive into the word of the good book, we find that forgiveness is about letting go of the resentment and the bitterness that can so often weigh us down. It's about releasing that heavy load of grudge and freeing ourselves to experience the love and the peace that the Lord wants for us. Now, I know it's easier said than done. Forgiveness, my friends, is a journey. Sometimes it's as simple as a heartfelt apology and a firm handshake. Other times, it can be as complex as a labyrinth with its twists and turns that we have to navigate our way through. In Ephesians chapter 4, verse 31, it says, "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice." That's a tall order, ain't it? But the reward is sweet. It's a heart that's unburdened and a spirit that's free. And why is forgiveness so important, you ask? Well, in Matthew chapter 6, verse 14, we're told, "For if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you." That's right, folks. Forgiveness is a two-way street. We give it and we receive it. But let's not forget, forgiveness doesn't mean we ignore the wrongs or pretend they didn't happen. No, it means we acknowledge the hurt, we feel the pain, but then we choose to let it go. We choose love over resentment, peace over conflict, and understanding over judgment. Forgiveness, my friends, is a mighty powerful thing. It can heal hearts, mend relationships, and bring about a peace that surpasses all understanding. It's not just about the words we say, but the actions we take and the love we show. So, we see, in the eyes of the Lord, forgiveness is a mighty important thing. Now, the Bible is plumb full of examples of forgiveness. Let's take a gander at some of them. Let's start with the parable of the prodigal son. This is a tale that Jesus told about a young man who took his inheritance early, squandered it on reckless living, and then returned home expecting nothing more than to be a servant in his father's house. But his father, instead of being angry or punitive, welcomed him back with open arms, a feast, and a celebration. His father said, "For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." Can you imagine the relief and joy the son must have felt in that moment of forgiveness? But let's not stop there. The story of Joseph and his brothers is another powerful example. Joseph, sold into slavery by his jealous brothers, could have sought revenge when he rose to power in Egypt, but he didn't. Instead, he chose to forgive them, saying, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good." Joseph understood that forgiveness wasn't just about letting his brothers off the hook. It was about freeing himself from the burden of resentment. And of course, we can't talk about forgiveness without mentioning the ultimate act of grace, Jesus forgiving those who crucified him. Even while hanging on a cross, Jesus spoke words of forgiveness. "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." His example reminds us that forgiveness is not about condoning wrong actions, but about releasing ourselves from the destructive cycle of resentment and revenge. These stories teach us the power of forgiveness and the freedom it brings. They show us that forgiveness is not a sign of weakness, but of strength. It's not about forgetting the wrong that was done. but about choosing to focus on love, grace, and future possibilities instead of past hurts. Each of these stories also highlights that forgiveness is not a one-time act, but a process, a choice that we make again and again. And each time we choose to forgive, we take a step towards healing, not just for ourselves, but for our relationships and our communities. But let's not forget that forgiveness is also a divine command. The Bible tells us in Ephesians 4, verse 32, "Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you." We are called not just to receive God's forgiveness, but to extend that forgiveness to others. So whether we're faced with a wayward child, a betraying sibling, or a cruel enemy, we can look to these biblical examples for inspiration and guidance. We can choose to respond not with anger or revenge, but with grace and forgiveness, just as God has forgiven us. These stories teach us the power of forgiveness and the freedom it brings. Now, I ain't gonna sugarcoat it, y'all. Forgiveness can be tougher than a $2 steak. Just like that steak needs some tenderizing, forgiveness requires some work on our part. It's a journey, not a destination. It demands us to let go of resentment, to drop the heavy luggage of grudges we've been dragging around. And I tell you, that's no easy task. It's like trying to catch a greased pig at a county fair, slippery and elusive. But here's the thing. The Bible tells us in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 31, "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice." It's a tall order, ain't it? But it's a command, not a suggestion. Then, there's the struggle to forget past wrongs. We're often like elephants in this regard, with memories that hold on to every hurt, every slight. But here's a little nugget of wisdom from the good book. In Hebrews chapter 8, verse 12, it says, "For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and their iniquities will I remember no more." If the Almighty can forget our wrongs, surely we can extend the same grace to others. In the face of these challenges, it's tempting to toss in the towel, to say, "It's just too hard." And you're right, it is hard. But remember what Jesus told us in the book of Matthew chapter 19, verse 26. "With men this is impossible, but with God all things are possible." So, while forgiveness may feel like trying to lasso the moon, it's not an insurmountable task. It's a challenge, sure, a challenge that requires us to lean on the Lord for strength and guidance, to let His love wash over our hardened hearts, softening them like butter on a hot biscuit. But remember, with God, all things are possible, even forgiveness. The power of forgiveness, folks, it's like a cool breeze on a hot summer's day. Imagine holding on to a burning coal, thinking it's going to harm the person who wronged you. But in reality, it's your own hand that's getting scorched. That's what holding on to grudges feels like. Now imagine releasing that burning coal. That's forgiveness. It's like a soothing salve to a burn, a balm to a wounded spirit. Let's visit the Bible for a moment. Remember Joseph the dreamer? His brothers sold him into slavery out of jealousy. But when famine struck and they came to Egypt, Joseph, instead of seeking revenge, forgave them. He recognized that what they intended for evil, God had used for good. Just imagine the transformation that forgiveness brought in their lives. And then there's the prodigal son. The father didn't just forgive him, he celebrated his return, showing us how forgiveness can transform lives and relationships. It's a powerful thing, isn't it? But let's not forget real life too. There's a story of a woman who forgave the man who took her daughter's life. Can you imagine the strength it took? Yet she said that forgiving him was the only way she could start healing. That's the power of forgiveness. It doesn't erase the pain, but it helps us move forward. And here's the kicker, folks. Forgiveness is not just for the person who wronged us, it's for us too. It's like freeing ourselves from a prison we didn't even realize we were in. It's about letting go of the past and opening our hearts to new possibilities. So you might be thinking, forgiveness sounds great, but it's hard. And you're right. It's one of the hardest things we'll ever do. But it's also one of the most liberating. So you see, forgiveness ain't just for the person who done us wrong, it's for us too. All right, now that we understand what forgiveness is and why it's so important, how in tarnation do we go about doing it? Well, my friends, the first step is to recognize that forgiveness is a choice. You've got to make the conscious decision to let go of the resentment, the anger, the hurt. It's not about saying what happened was okay or that it didn't hurt. It's about deciding not to let it control you anymore. Now, I know what you're thinking. Easier said than done, right? And you're not wrong. That's why the second step is so important. You've got to turn to the good book. There's a verse, Ephesians 4, verse 31, that says, Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice. That's a pretty clear command, isn't it? But how do we put away all that bitterness and anger? That's where step 3 comes in. You've got to pray. You've got to ask the Lord for help. It's like what's written in Philippians 4, verse 13. I can do all things through Christ, which strengtheneth me. And then there's step 4, which is to practice empathy. Try to understand where the other person was coming from. Why did they do what they did? What were they feeling? Now, this doesn't mean you have to agree with them or excuse their actions, but understanding can often lead to forgiveness. The 5th step is to express your feelings. Now, this doesn't mean you need to confront the person who hurt you, although you can if you feel it's necessary. But you do need to acknowledge your feelings. Write them down. Talk to a trusted friend or counselor. Pray about them, whatever works for you. And finally, step 6 is to let go. This is often the hardest part. But remember, holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. It only hurts you, so let it go. Release it. And when those feelings of resentment start to creep back in, remind yourself of your decision to forgive and ask the Lord for strength. Now, I want to be clear, these steps aren't a magic formula. They won't make the pain disappear overnight, but they can start you on the path to forgiveness. And remember, forgiveness isn't a one-time thing. It's a process. It's a journey. It might take a while. You might have to forgive the same person for the same thing more than once, and that's okay. Remember, forgiveness ain't a one-time thing. It's a journey. Now, let's talk about the blessings that come with forgiveness. You know, forgiveness isn't just about letting go of grudges or resentment. It's a balm, a soothing salve that heals our hearts and minds. When we forgive, we're not just doing a favor to the one who wronged us. We're granting ourselves a gift of peace, of serenity, and of growth. Imagine carrying a heavy sack of stones up a steep hill. That's what holding on to resentment feels like. Each grudge is a stone adding to the weight, making it harder and harder for us to climb. But the moment we choose to forgive, it's like setting down that sack. Suddenly, we can breathe easier, we can move faster. That's the blessing of peace that forgiveness ushers in. Now let's take a look at our relationships. We've all had disagreements, misunderstandings, or conflicts. But when we decide to forgive, we're not just mending a rift, we're strengthening the bond. Forgiveness paves the way for understanding, empathy, and a deeper connection. It's like repairing a broken vase with gold. The cracks are still there, but they're filled with something precious, something beautiful. That's the blessing of improved relationships that forgiveness brings. And what about spiritual growth? You see, forgiveness isn't just an act, it's a journey of self-discovery, of humility, of grace. It's a journey that brings us closer to our higher selves, to the divine. Every time we forgive, we're stretching our hearts, expanding our capacity for love and compassion. Like a seed pushing through the soil toward the sun, forgiveness propels us toward spiritual growth. So, my dear friends, let's choose forgiveness, not for them, but for us, for our peace, for our growth. For remember, forgiveness isn't just about setting them free, it's about setting ourselves free. Free to live, to love, to grow. So let us embrace forgiveness and reap the blessings it brings. Well, we've walked a long road today, talking about forgiveness. We started our journey by pondering on the profound essence of forgiveness, didn't we? We came to understand that it's not just about saying, "I forgive you," but about giving ourselves the freedom to let go of the bitterness, the resentment, and the pain that can weigh heavy on our hearts. We then opened the pages of the good book and found tales of forgiveness as old as time itself. We saw how Joseph forgave his brothers even after they sold him into slavery. We saw the prodigal son welcomed back with open arms by his father. These stories remind us that no matter how deep the wound, forgiveness can bring about healing and reconciliation. But let's not forget, we acknowledge that forgiveness can be a tough mountain to climb. It's not always easy to let go of our hurt and anger. But that's where the power of forgiveness comes into play. It has the strength to change lives, to mend broken relationships, and to bring peace where there was once strife. And how do we harness this power? By choosing to forgive even when it's hard. By letting go of our desire for revenge and choosing instead to show love and kindness. It's a choice we make every day, in every interaction. We also talked about the blessings of forgiveness. It's not just about what we give to others, but also about what we receive in return. The peace, the joy, the freedom. These are the gifts that forgiveness brings into our lives. So as we wrap up our discussion today, let's remember this. Forgiveness is not just a one-time act, but a continuous journey. It's a journey that requires courage, patience, and above all, love. It's a journey that can transform our lives and the lives of those around us. May the good Lord guide us all on this journey of forgiveness. Until next time, y'all, God bless. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and comment.